Welcome to Kansas Ag Reports. I'm Ken Rogers. On this week's program, we talk with Dr. Glynn Tonser, K-State Livestock Economist. He was recently a presenter at the Kansas Livestock Association meeting in Topeka. We'll also have features from the Kansas Soybean Commission, Kansas Department of Agriculture, as well as Kansas Grain Sorghum, and the weekly update from the Kansas Livestock Association and market information from Pinion.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Soybean Commission. The Soybean Checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers. Kansas Farm Bureau, a grassroots ag organization representing the state's farm and ranch families since 1919, kfb.org. And the Kansas Wheat Commission, lending in the adoption of profitable innovations from wheat, online at kswheat.com.
And agriculture information, net farm income, abroad to measure profits, forecast $149.7 billion for calendar year 24. That's down $6 billion or 4.1% relative to last year. Inflation-adjusted farm income forecast to drop by $9.5 billion or 6.3%. Now, despite the predicted decline, net farm income in 24 would be 16% above the 20-year average of $121.4 billion. Cash receipts from the sale of ag commodities are forecast to decrease by some $4 billion from last year to $516.9 billion in 2024. Total crop receipts expected to drop by $25 billion, 9% from last year, led by lower receipts for corn and soybeans. Direct government payments forecast to fall by $1.7 billion, about 13.6% to $10.6 billion in 2024. Total animal product receipts expected to increase by $21 billion, or 8.4%, following increases in receipts for cattle, calves, eggs, milk, broiler, and hogs. Well, some lawmakers in the lame duck session of Congress want to include specific provisions to help commodity farmers who were not hit by disasters and many of the potential disaster aid packages that are being thrown about. While many farmers weren't hit by disasters like hurricanes and wildfires, they have experienced significant price decreases for their commodities. And Congress also has to deal with another potential shutdown and said to be looking at another short-term extension of that farm bill that would put most major funding decisions also into fiscal year 25 for the new Congress and President-elect Donald Trump. Well, some in the House and leadership of the Republicans plan to attach a one-year extension to the farm bill in that continuing resolution that keeps the government funded. Reports say there's also a chance to add the farm bill to the annual defense authorization bill, which is one of those must-pass packages to handle this month, but most are leaning towards the CR. And Peter Navarro, returning to the White House, the President-elect Trump's second term as a senior trade advisor. Trump announced it this week that Navarro helmed the White House National Trade Council during the first term of the Trump administration, will serve as a senior counselor for trade and manufacturing, according to a pair of posts on that Truth Social. The former White House aide was released from federal prison back in July, following about a 4-month sentence for defying a federal subpoena after he failed to hand over documents to the House committee investigating the events that happened on January 6th of 2021. Navarro, 75 years old. Well, he's been an outspoken critic of China, a China hawk, and staunch advocate for using tariffs to lift the U.S. economy. He's authored many books on the U.S.-China trade relationship, including Death by China and the Coming China Wars. He also penned a chapter of the Heritage Foundation's Project 2025 report, what he calls Fair Trade. We'll have more coming up after the break.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by Kansas Grain Sorghum, growers working together. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org. Grass and Grain, online or in the mail, keeping Kansas farmers informed for over 60 years. grassandgrain.com.
Joining us now is K-State Livestock Economist Dr. Glynn Tonser. He was at the KLA meeting in Manhattan talking about beef demand, and this has been quite a story to tell. As you and I have talked throughout the year, but it just keeps on moving.
Yeah, beef demand overall has been pretty good. What I did here at this conference was try to clarify the important difference between consumption and demand. Consumption itself is not demand. There's no measure of what you're willing to pay for that. And that's important as we go forward because less beef is probably going to be available per U.S. resident. So that distinction is where I spent a lot of my time today. And then I proceeded to overview quite a few of the meat demand resources that we have here at K-State. Hopefully raised awareness of those. And then, some of the things I highlighted were exactly like you said, was what's the status? I shared some numbers. October was better than September, for example. We're sitting here talking in November of 2024 and shared some reasons for optimism in 2025.
What are some of those reasons? Because I think those of us neophytes, we kind of go out and say, well, we can kind of see some of those things that might, but you have the hard data.
So I'm cautiously optimistic that in 2025, the public will get more comfortable with their finances. And what I mean by that is their earning power relative to the cost of living and broader macroeconomic uncertainties. Maybe they'll get more comfortable. That's occurred last few months. So hopefully that trend continues. And the relevance for the meat industry is if it does, what we see is when your financial sentiment is improving, you're more likely to spend on food, not only in through the grocery store, but particularly away from home. Restaurant spending is higher. So maybe we'll see more restaurant demand is the point of that. And we see inclusion of meat in yesterday's meals being a lot higher if you tell me your finances are improving or you're more comfortable with your finances compared to last year. So the macroeconomic environment and what it means to the public's comfort with their finances, I think is definitely one of the most important things to watch as we go into 2025.
So the demand is one thing, but the ability is kind of completely different because especially if we're talking more about domestic, not only supplies, but also just domestic demand. Is that kind of what you're focused on then?
Yeah, and my comments here would be on domestic demand.
Yeah.
I mean, I touched on export demand, but not much during this session. And demand here would be their willingness to pay for those pounds. So to make that distinction, one of the numbers I shared was, there's an estimate out there that 2 years from now, the average U.S. resident might be consuming 4 pounds less of beef. That's primarily because we expect 4 pounds less of beef being available. If we see retail beef prices go up enough, and I said maybe 7% per annual is the number I shared, then I would still say demand was okay. And if it's above that, demand actually grew. So that clarification between consumption per person and demand, again, consumption doesn't consider what you're willing to pay. Demand is both a price you're willing to pay and a volume consideration is very important. Those who want more on that, please go to our agmanager.info website.
Dr. Glynn Tonser, K-State Livestock Economist, is joining us. We're going to take a break, come back, and I do want to talk about the Meat Demand Monitor and what that is. So if you're not aware how to find it, and it's very interesting stuff, comes out every month. So we'll do that in just a moment.
Kansas Ag Report brought to you in part by the Kansas Livestock Association, supporting members' business interests and meeting consumer demands. KLA.org. Oldie Seed Farms, carrying soil-specific seed. Find them on the web at oldieseed.com. That's OHLDE seed.com. And Kansas Corn, building the future at kansascorn.com.
Dr. Glynn Tonser, K-State Livestock Economist, is joining us, and one of the things that you do is to help coordinate something called the Meat Demand Monitor that you put together and then release. Many folks say this is just about as important part of the economy as what goes on at the University of Missouri, what goes on in the broader aspect of University of Michigan with the consumer CPI, and also what goes on at Purdue. So this is very important, this data. And I guess maybe take us back just a little bit. Why did you decide to do this, and what have you learned over the time that this has been going on?
Yeah, so the Meat Demand Monitor, or the acronym is MDM that I often use, has been going on. Active data collection began in February of 2020, and just, it's beef and pork checkoff funded, based here at K-State in the Department of Ag Econ, as you alluded to. Everything from that you can find on our Ag Manager website, so I'm not going to give a full lecture on it. Everything is there. The way it works is we're always doing a online survey of the U.S. public. So, the first day of the month through about the 25th day of the month, we're collecting data from the public in a way to be nationally representative by population, gender, income, and so forth. And we're tracking what you had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner yesterday. Did it have bacon? Did it have ribeye steak? Those kinds of things. What's the importance of safety versus price in your decisions? We have a measure of demand, a willingness to pay for a dinner meal away from home. Lots of those kinds of things. I'm kind of wetting the whistle of those things we regularly report. You can find 4-page reports we put out every month once they're approved by USDA. The raw data, the original surveys are posted, and we periodically do deep dives that may not be for the faint of heart, but they have some nuggets that are unique to that data set as well. One of the trends, just to maybe give an example of that, is Justin Bina is now a faculty member at Arizona State. Previously was here at K-State working with me, getting his PhD. We've spent a lot of time looking at the role of intentionally having protein in your diet to meet a fitness and personal health goal. I'm happy to talk more about that, but some of those kind of things you can only do with a unique data set that's tracking that exercise intent as well as meat consumption and demand.
Are we getting to the point, I guess, is more data a good thing? I mean, can it really focus in on helping not only consumers and some of their trends, but also those that are basically they're kind of paying the freight, the checkoff dollars, try to find what they need to do to continue to meet the demand of the consumer?
So no data set is perfect, and more data on its own, I would argue, is not valuable unless we translate that into useful decisions. So hopefully what me and others I work with are taking that unique data and adding value. And what I hope the value is additional tracking of consumption and demand, why that is or isn't going up, who that is going up or not with, and so forth. So those narrow questions of who, where, how much, those kind of things are the value proposition. And if we're not answering those in a way we could do otherwise, then the value of said data isn't really there. So is more data better? I would argue only if it comes with the ability to answer either more questions or answer them better and deeper. I hope the MDM does that. And over time, exactly which questions we're doing that with evolves. But more data itself isn't valuable unless it's enabling us to answer economically relevant questions that we couldn't do otherwise.
And that's a situation as you come up, do you come up with, you have the core set of questions, and then do you tweak based on what's out there, what you're hearing, what maybe to find some of those trends then?
Yeah, so at least 90% of the questions are the same month to month. Every once in a while there's little tweaks, like we're asking some holiday questions now and so forth that obviously aren't as relevant in February. So there's some of that seasonal part. But by design, it's a monitor, and therefore it's perpetually asking the same question. So, I could tell you I made the comment earlier, ribeye versus bacon. I can tell you whether they had it at home or not. And is that different in California versus Kansas? So those kinds of details we could do all the time. We're not changing how we ask that because we don't want to change how we're asking it, because the value is to see, is it changing over time and by how much? And you only do that well if you keep the questions the same.
Well, one thing right before we wrap it up, talking a little bit more about the situation of, are you eating proteins with your workout? Was it helping or hurting, or how deep of a dive do you get into something like that?
So we get very deep, and I won't share all that here, but you can find on Ag Manager more of that. But on balance, it's helpful. And the punchline I would share is, if you are intentionally eating protein to meet a personal health, fitness, workout goal, you're less price sensitive. So geeky term would be is your own price elasticity is closer to zero is the way to think about it. So a higher price is going to scare you away slower than if you're not an intentional exerciser and protein consumer. The relevance sitting here today is, if in fact we have less beef available and if aggregate demand is flat or better, we're going to see higher consumer retail prices over the next 2 years. The response to that will be different between the exercising and the non-exercising group. The exercising group is the one I expect to have the more staying power, less likely to walk away as the beef price gets higher. Conversely, the others might be more price sensitive.
Okay. Very good. Again, you can find more information at agmanager.info from Dr. Glynn Tonser, K-State Livestock Economist. We're at the KLA meeting in Manhattan. More coming up in just a moment.
What if U.S. soybean meal were more than a commodity? If seed companies and the soybean checkoff built a better variety? That future is here. The time is now. To meet end-user demands, the soybean checkoff is investing in the compositional quality of soybeans, including meal. A message from the Kansas Soybean Commission, the soybean checkoff, progress powered by Kansas farmers.
It's Commodity Commission's election time again in Kansas. Soybean producers in Kansas seeking to influence how the checkoff returns value to their operations are invited to campaign for a seat on the Kansas Soybean Commission. This year, the Soybean Commission seats for Districts 7, 8, and 9, comprising the eastern third of the state, are up for election. Interested individuals have until November 30th, 2024 to meet the filing deadline. Terms begin April 1, 2025, following the election process. To be eligible, candidates must gather 20 signatures from farming peers with no more than 5 signatures from any one county. Signatures may be submitted online, by paper, or both. Online petitions can be found at www.agriculture.ks.gov/KGCvoter. Paper packets are available from the Kansas Department of Agriculture or from Kansas Soybean directly. The application form is also posted at www.kansassoybeans.org/forms. Per Kansas Department of Agriculture guidelines, candidates 18 and older must have been actively engaged in growing soybeans within the preceding 5 years to be eligible and may only represent the district of their primary residence. The Commission meets in person 3 times annually with additional virtual meetings and travel commitments throughout the year. Time is volunteered, but travel expenses are reimbursable per KSC policy. The primary responsibility of being a commissioner is attending the December meeting where funding proposals are presented and checkoff investments are decided. Questions about commissioner expectations may be directed to the Kansas Soybean office.
What does a brighter, more sustainable future look like in our cities and towns, and how do we get there? When New York needed an alternative fuel source to reduce carbon emissions, the city found what it needed in biodiesel made from U.S. soybean oil.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Protecting animal health is a critical part of the mission of the Kansas Department of Agriculture. Animal agriculture is a significant part of the Kansas economy, so animal health is of critical importance, not only to the agriculture industry, but to the whole state. That's why the Kansas Department of Agriculture makes it a priority to lead the nation in foreign animal disease planning, training, and exercising. In mid-December, KDA will lead a 3-day functional exercise named Watchtower to practice the state's agriculture emergency response plan by playing out an animal disease scenario. In the event of an agriculture incident, the emergency response is led by the Kansas Department of Agriculture, and our incident management team develops policies and operational plans to manage the disease response and to provide factual, transparent, public information and education to the industry and the public, including a phone bank to receive calls from citizens who would be affected by an incident. Each year, we include nearly 200 players and observers who participate in the exercise, including representatives from other state agencies, federal agencies, departments of ag from other states, and Kansas legislators, along with agriculture organizations and private industry. Responding to a foreign animal disease will require cooperation among all of these entities in order to stop the spread of the disease and enable the industry to get back to business as quickly as possible. After the exercise, our emergency management and animal health team will spend several months examining the lessons learned from this year's exercise as we seek ways to improve the state's response plan. This continual improvement of the animal disease response plan supports the investment Kansas has made in sustaining the rigorous practice via the full-scale exercise, and we will continue those efforts to protect animal agriculture in Kansas.
Grain sorghum is one of the most important cereal crops worldwide, and Kansas leads the nation in its production. Over the years, sorghum has been either exported, used in animal feed domestically, or for other industrial uses. Recently, its use in the ethanol market has seen tremendous growth, with 30% of domestic sorghum typically going to ethanol production. Kansas Grain Sorghum is committed to sorghum research, market development, and education. Learn more at ksgrainsorghum.org.
It's time for another Kansas Sorghum Harvest Update. I'm Maddie Meyer, Director of Communications and Outreach for the Kansas Grain Sorghum Commission. Today I'm joined by Kevin Knievel, our District 8 Commissioner from White City, who also serves as the Commission's Vice Chairman.
Well, we've always grown sorghum as long as I remember, but we like all the benefits that sorghum brings to our operation. It spreads out risk. It has good erosion control, be it wind or water or the root mats that's in the soil, and in our we just like the benefits it has in our rotation for other crops too. Yes, we've been very pleased with our sorghum crop. It's been yielding on like kind of ground. It's been yielding as well, or maybe even possibly better than our corn crop. I'm going to say that probably from 90 to 120 or 120 plus. I think probably planting date. Corn was planted earlier and was challenged. Our sorghum was actually quite a bit later and got an opportune rain or two, and that helped it out. So it was, it's quite a bit better than last year, but still last year our sorghum did okay with conditions that we had.
Many seed companies claim to offer the latest genetics, but how many have tested those genetics in soils just like yours? The Oldie Seed Know to Grow research program has fully tested the latest seed genetics in soils that are right in your neighborhood. The Oldie Seed Know to Grow program can recommend the best performing hybrids from technologies like Enlist, Extend, and Liberty Link that will optimize the yield and profit of every acre on your farm. Contact Oldie Seed today.
Bill and Debbie Barbie of Protection have been selected as the recipients of the 2024 Kansas Leopold Conservation Award. Given in honor of renowned conservationist Aldo Leopold, the award recognizes landowners who go above and beyond in the management of soil health, water quality, and wildlife habitat on working land. In Kansas, the $10,000 award is presented by the Sand County Foundation, American Farmland Trust, Kansas Association of Conservation Districts, and Ranchland Trust of Kansas. The Barbie Ranch is located in both Clark and Comanche counties. Through rotational grazing, prescribed burning, and the removal of invasive trees, the Barbies have restored the ranch's native habitats and ecological functions. Thousands of acres of healthier grassland and riparian areas provide habitat for the lesser prairie chicken, the whooping crane, and Arkansas river shiner. Conservation partnerships have achieved improved water quality, biodiversity, and carbon sequestration on the landscape. The Kansas Leopold Conservation Award is made possible thanks to the Farm Credit Associations of Kansas, ITC Great Plains, Kansas Department of Agriculture Division of Conservation, Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks, Kansas Ducks Unlimited, Kansas Forest Service, Green Cover Seed, McDonald's, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, and a Kansas Leopold Conservation Award recipient.
Imagine turning soybean oil, used cooking oils, and waste animal fats into fuel so amazing it drives U.S. jobs and our economy forward. Learn more about biodiesel at americasadvancedbiofuel.com.
The Kansas Wheat Innovation Center in Manhattan is rediscovering ways to get improved varieties and new genetics in the hands of farmers faster. Grower-led and checkoff-funded research initiatives are bringing about positive change. This grassroots leadership provides a strong voice in Topeka and Washington, D.C. Now is the time to partner with Kansas Wheat in moving wheat forward. Kansas Wheat Commission and Kansas Association of Wheat Growers. Farmers investing in their future and yours. Log on to rediscoverwheat.org.
Hello and welcome. Tanner Burning with Pinion Risk Management, giving you a commodity market update for the week of November 25th, 2024. I hope your holiday was spent with family and friends, and you enjoyed some of the season's greatest feasts, and my personal favorite time of the year. Not usually do we see a shortened holiday trade week run into December futures contract first notice date, but here we are in 2024. Positions will be rolling into the March contract from the harvest front month contract by Friday, likely putting selling pressure on as farmers price basis contracts or commercials roll over their futures into later months. Finding a bullish story in grains is about as hard as buttoning your top button after a third trip to the pie table, as we've seen liquidation from the temporary highs in corn, continued bottom dwelling in beans. Wheat is hanging around like the neighbor whose family left town on a trip without him, just trying to find its place and likely watching too much of the evening news. I'll state the topics that we should be watching over the next few months in what I believe is to be the most important to price direction. Number one is the weather in South America and the developing global oversupply as we roll big crop into big crop for the second year in a row. Number two is demand story 2.0 with the added twist of President Trump and his scheme to tariff other countries to create an even more even trade deficit. Most importantly, the countries who are the biggest buyers of our ag commodities and products. Number three is inflation, supportive for commodities if rates do stay in this area, as we could very well see the inflation come back into the picture, meaning commodities will become a hedge as the large spec money. Couple that with the risk from number one or number two, and we could be back in a somewhat profitable type crop prices. Until number one, two, or three come into picture in any form or a combination of the three, we are risk off with large supplies or just adequate run-of-the-mill type demand. Nothing up front to add any premium to these prices, but three major stories that can keep us under pressure. Large supply environments create an opportunity for markets to inflict the most pain on the producer and try to make them reduce production as the market is in no need for it. I encourage producers, as always, to watch their bottom line and look at the fact that the smallest loser could in fact be 2025's biggest winner. When it comes to following the day-to-day moves in an ever-changing agricultural market, we at Pinion Risk Management look to be a trusted source of information for our clients, along with being a guiding hand on decision-making and reasoning towards a market plan. To learn more about our approach at risk management, please give us a call, 888-452-8751. I'm Tanner Burning with Pinion, and thank you for your time.
Kansas Corn reminds you that E15 fuel is the right choice for every kind of driver. For the car enthusiast, E15 has higher octane. For the thrifty driver, E15 is priced lower than regular unleaded. For the nature lover, E15 provides cleaner air. For the shopper who buys local, E15 has more ethanol from our Kansas corn farms. Choose E15 for a higher octane, lower price, cleaner American fuel. Message from the Kansas Corn Commission. Learn more at kscorn.com.
That's our program this week. Thank you so much for joining us. Be social with us online, kansasagreport.net, or our social media channels. I'm Ken Rogers. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week on the Kansas Ag Report.
Next time you see a beautiful field of corn, reach out and thank the farmers who work tirelessly to raise corn for livestock feed, renewable fuels, and exports to feed a growing world population. The farmers on the Kansas Corn Commission work for Kansas Corn with grower-funded checkoff dollars that support foreign and domestic market development, research, promotion, and education to expand opportunities for Kansas farmers. To learn more, visit kscorn.com.
What does a brighter, more sustainable future look like in our cities and towns, and how do we get there? When New York needed an alternative fuel source to reduce carbon emissions, the city found what it needed in biodiesel made from U.S. soybean oil.